President Muhammadu Buhari's nephew, Mamman Daura, reputed to be one of the most influential persons in the administration, has spoken at his relationship with President Buhari. In an interview with the BBC Hausa service, Daura, who had been reported to have a strong influence on the president, says he usually advises the president but does not tell him what to do. Asked whether if it was true that he and the president spent younger years together, he said it was true, they were together. The octogenarian also spoke on agitations in some sections of the country about the for power shift as the nation heads towards the 2023 general elections. According to Daura, the time has come for the country to unite and embrace competence. It is better for this country to be one. It should be for the most competent and not for someone who comes from somewhere. He said in an apparent vote against the rotation of political power. I mean, what's your take on this?
Okay, so it is good to know, if you pick up a copy of This Day today, you read the full article, it's interesting. It's good to know that the president is not being teleguided, as Mamman Daura, his nephew, mentioned. However, that is contrary to the picture painted by the wife of the president, who had multiple times accused Mamman Daura of, usurping the president's power and even denying her access at some point. So it's good we're hearing his side of the story. I guess the jury is out there to decide, what side of the divide or what side of the story they'd like to go with. On the zoning issue, I agree with him that we should look at competence over geographical space. But are we not too late in the day? This gentleman agreement unwritten by political parties that have been adopted over the years, some will say perhaps that is what has helped the cohesion of the country. If you look at it in a way, the fact that power can rotate and everybody can have a sense of belonging. And we are actually divided by those lines, ethnic lines, religious lines, whether we like it or not. So to discard this agreement, I don't know, I guess it also depends on the political parties.
Dr. Abati?
Well, yes, in terms of context, Mamman Daura became a personality of interest to many Nigerians when the information was put out there that there was a cabal, or there is a cabal within the presidency that was in control of the presidency. And many Nigerians, both at home and abroad, bought into that narrative. Now, that narrative gained, stronger currency when there was that face-off between the First Lady, Mrs. Aisha Buhari, and the daughter of Mamman Daura over access to a particular section of the villa. And you recall that at the time, the First Lady had in fact issued a statement announcing the existence of a cabal and even announcing, disclosing or alleging that Garuba Shehu, who is a Senior Special Assistant on Media and Publicity, was the errand person of that particular cabal. So what Mamman Daura has done with this interview, I think it was on the BBC Hausa service,
yes,
is to make it clear that, look, he doesn't belong to any cabal, and even if he's, related to the president, he's not in a position to dictate to the president or to dictate to government, and that, yes, they see each other occasionally because they are family members. But he then went on to raise some key issues about zoning and rotational presidency. He said we have tried rotation about 2 or 3 times, that now we should be focusing more on competence. Now, in principle, people will say, yes, competence. But the issue is that competence has been one of the major problems in Nigeria in terms of access to privileges, access to office, and also in politics. And people will say that they draw attention to the existence of a quota system in almost everything. Okay, in some circumstances, it's called the federal character principle in order to ensure representation. But there are some people who say, yes, while it is good to reflect Nigeria's diversity, the quota system should not be extended to everything. There should be a moratorium in some cases, say like admissions, for example. Why should somebody score 250 from Imo State and will be denied admission, and somebody with a score of 80 from the northern part of the country will be given admission for the same exam? So these are some of the fault lines in our relationship within Nigeria. But Afenifere has responded. Afenifere says, look, we will still do rotational presidency. We will still do zoning until there is proper restructuring, which will create room for competitiveness and for competence. And then, of course, other groups that have also responded are saying that the whole idea of it is that somebody from the north is talking about no zoning at this time, so as to provide an opportunity for northerners to come forward as presidential candidates in 2023. But I think what is important at the end of the day is that the right of the Nigerian people, the Nigerian electorate, to make their own choice should be what should guide us going forward.
All right, great comments there. And let's quickly move to the next story. About 3 persons have been reported killed in a gas cylinder explosion that occurred on Tuesday evening at Aforogun Street in Ajao Estate near Murtala Mohammed International Airport. According to the reports, property worth millions of naira were also destroyed in the fire that followed the explosion. According to an eyewitness report, officials of Lagos State Management Authority and Lagos State Fire Service and the Nigerian Police Force and the Lagos State Transport Management Authority were quick to respond to the emergency. Affected persons at the scenes are currently receiving treatment. What do you have to say about this? This was very painful yesterday when the news came in. It was quite very sad. They said it was a gas cylinder. A lot of people thought it was an explosion first, but finally discovered it was a gas cylinder.
Well, our heart goes out to those who have lost loved ones and lost property in this incident. It is sad, but I think that investigation is ongoing. We'll find out truly what happened.
Well, first, let us commend the Lagos State Emergency Management Agency. The Director General said, look, they got to the scene very quickly. And the Lagos Fire Service was also on the scene very quickly, which is something that is unusual. But the story is as follows. Some guy selling gas, retail gas, had closed for the day. Then he got a call that the customer was waiting. He came back. He attended to the customer. Then the customer was going to carry the gas cylinder onto a tricycle.
Oh, wow.
And I think it dropped. And there was a fire incident. 9 shops were affected. The Director General of the emergency agency says they were able to account for 2 bodies, but that they are still going through the recovery process to check, the scene of the explosion. About 9 shops were razed to the ground. Vehicles, other things were damaged within the vicinity. I think the lesson of it, one, it's about safety. I don't think Nigerians take enough safety precautions. This is not the first time I'm hearing stories about gas cylinders exploding. And I think maybe the fire service and the LASEMA will have to help Nigerians about how to handle gas cylinders. You will be going on the streets, you will see people, just carrying gas cylinder on their heads, handling them in an inappropriate manner. And even persons who sell these gas cylinders, who provide the service, you go to their shops sometimes, this is cylinders of gas, piled, and then just next a few meters away, somebody is roasting corn and playing around with fire. So these are the issues, and I think public enlightenment will help. We commiserate with the people who lost their lives, but we have these fire accidents, one too many in Lagos.
That's quite painful, all right. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll talk to the trio of Rotus, Michael, and Aaron Akerjala to give us Africa and global business and COVID-19 updates. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our one and only Rotus Odiri is now here to give us Africa business update. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Adesuwa, and good morning, Rufai. How are you doing? We kick things off with the NNPC. There's been a big deal that's been announced to the tune of $1.5 billion. It's a prepayment deal. It's part of a structured trade finance deal that NNPC has struck with independent traders Matrix Energy and Vitol Group. This has been backed by Standard Chartered Bank, also been backed by UBA and the Afri-Exim Bank. And what it is that Vitol Group and Matrix Energy have secured about 15,000 barrels per day of crude to be delivered to them over the next 5 years. So the prepayment is an advance payment of $1.5 billion to the NNPC much needed cash that's going to go towards working capital and also other infrastructure improvements. I understand that according to Reuters, one of the refineries is supposed to be assisted with these funds. But you can see this diagram here, which is a prepayment diagram. The buyer there is supposed to be the Matrix Energy Group, and the buyer has a one-on-one deal with the counterparty. The counterparty is the NNPC, and then financing comes from the banks. Usually with some of these deals, you don't have to go to a syndicate of banks in order to get this done. You can actually get one or two in order to assist. So it's a deal that the NNPC would have liked to have set up with other independent traders over the course of a number of years, but issues with transparency hindered them, which probably is why we saw, and we discussed this on the morning show here, the release of the 2018 financials for a number of subsidiaries. So perhaps that was a prelude to getting this deal off the ground. So again, it's part of structured trade finance that's done with commodity producers. There is, of course, the question of oil prices, the price at which Vitol Group and Matrix Energy has secured these barrels of oil. You can also almost look at it as a forward contract, if you will, which is done in trading, where you can lock in a price over a number of years. So it is likely, if the oil prices continue to rise, depending on the agreement that's been made, Nigeria has to now watch out for how prices move compared to what price has been locked in for this deal. Moving on to another high-profile endorsement for Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, this time coming from Gordon Brown, who was the former Chancellor of the Exchequer of the UK from 1997 through to 2007, and then Prime Minister of the UK from 2007 through to 2010. He endorsed her over this gentleman, Liam Fox, who is the UK's nominee for the position of the Director General of the World Trade Organization. Gordon Brown says that Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's experience speaks for itself. And so, again, this is the second high-profile endorsement. We talked about Mr. Lumumba from Kenya last time, who endorsed Dr. Okonjo-Iweala over Amina Mohammed from Kenya, his fellow Kenyan. And now we've got Gordon Brown endorsing her over his fellow UK compatriot, Liam Fox. Although I should point out, Liam Fox is a Tory, so he's a conservative. And, of course, Gordon Brown is from the Labour Party. So, you want to factor that in when you consider him not supporting him because of political ties. Also, UBA, they've made 6 big appointments with regards to their Pan-African and international strategy. We've got Rokia Hako, who is now the CEO for their subsidiary in Mali, Chioma Mang, CEO of their subsidiary in Uganda, Chinedu Obeta, CEO of their subsidiary in Zambia, Bode Eregbesola, CEO of their UBA subsidiary in Senegal, Usman Isiaka, CEO of their subsidiary in Sierra Leone. Couldn't get photographs of Kingsley Ulifun, CEO of Tanzania, and Ogechi. Actually, Kingsley Ulufun is the CEO of Tanzania. Ogechi Altrade and Amadao Konate, they are for UBA America. So Ogechi Altrade is the head of retail banking for UBA America, and Amadao Konate is the head for Treasury and International Payments. When you put all these new appointments together, we have a quote from the chairman himself of UBA Group, Mr. Tomi Elumino. He says, the appointments that we've just seen in the previous slide further reflect the strong growth of the group's Pan-African businesses, currently responsible for over 40%. I mean, that's over half of total group revenue, and the increasing importance of their international businesses in London, Paris, and New York, offering, of course, superior treasury trading and corporate banking solutions to their clients globally. So that's with the announcements that's made. So that's part of their Pan-African global strategy for UBA. And finally, something interesting, funny here. Doyin Okukwe, who was in the administrations of former President Obasanjo and Goodluck Jonathan, said governments must stop banks from selling recharge cards. The business is worth 10 billion per day and can provide jobs for 5 million youths nationwide and reduce unemployment. Banks should not be in retail businesses where they strangulate small individual traders. Government must protect MSMEs. And then there was a response I thought was interesting from a young man. He says, how do you respond to this, sir? The youths don't need to use their productive time to be running around selling recharge cards. Give them electricity, good roads, and secure their environment. They will create jobs for millions. Thanks, but no chance. Says recharge, no be walk. And that's African business update for you there.
Well, I think that response was quite apt. But Rotus, I'm interested in Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's story. You talked about this high-profile endorsement, but how significant are these?
Oh, it's very significant. I mean, for one, you have to think of the position of the president. Mr. Lumumba, very respected individual in Kenya. One is the individual. Two is the fact that he's picking her over his fellow countrymen. So that's Lumumba in Kenya. Now you've got Gordon Brown, former Chancellor of the Exchequer and Prime Minister, the leader of the UK. So one, his position, without even considering anything, is his position. Two, he picked Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala over Liam Fox, his fellow compatriot. So you put those two together, and it's quite massive. It's a huge endorsement.
Well, if I may add, to those 2 points that you have raised, the third point will be that, all these endorsements also have persuasive authority. You recall that, the General Council of the WHO does not vote. The 164 members, they arrive at decisions by consensus. Yes. And all of this, is in the public domain. The candidates, they have up to about 2 months or so to campaign. So all of these endorsements, I guess, would help to further, position Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. And Mr. Gordon Brown is not just talking. He knows that very well, because I recall that in 2014, as the UN envoy for global education, Mr. Brown visited Nigeria to launch what was called the Safe Schools Initiative, which was supposed to make schools safe and encourage school enrollment, particularly for the girl child. And he and Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala worked together then in this regard in the area of education. So when Gordon Brown says she has a capacity to deliver even on the toughest of jobs, right, it's an assessment that is coming from direct personal knowledge of Dr. Okonjo-Iweala's capacity.
Yes, all right, I'm quite excited about this. And for the fact that, despite the fact that UK pushed a candidate, he went to Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. That's very commendable. Let's not forget, Liam Fox is not an easy fry too, member of the Tory anyway. Exactly. But for the fact that Gordon Brown has said, I'm going with Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, that's commendable. And I see more to come. I predict more to come.
Right, more big endorsements.
More big endorsement, more of the big guys to come. I'm looking at the likes of presidents of nations very soon and very, very important personalities to endorse her. She's the woman for the job.
But Dr. Fox, I don't think Dr. Fox stands much of a chance.
No, he can't.
Compared to her,
he's a Brexiteer. The other European countries will block him.
Right. Yeah. His vast experience.
All right. Thank you so much, Rotus, for the update. And for more business update, let's turn out to London, where Michael Wilson is standing by. Hello, Michael. Are we throwing money from the skies this morning?
Helicopter money.
You're going to vote for me, aren't you? When I become president, you're going to vote for me. I thought you'd like that.
I will, as long as we get the helicopter money.
Right. So China shares, first of all, investors buying after the slumps and so on. But what we're facing today, and I'm sure you will reflect this, is we're not quite sure about whether there's going to be a second spike, and more countries are coming up to saying that there may well be. I was listening just before I came on air to the European chief of the World Health Organization, and he couldn't actually say definitely, but who can? Bad earnings season in Japan continues, cannon down to a 21-year low. That's the camera and the photocopying people, and also Nissan shares down 10% after a profit warning. So I would just say that global stock markets appear to be starting to get a little wobbly, basically, as coronavirus is painting like a second picture of some challenging times to come, despite the rising hopes of vaccines and so on, and the likelihood of central banks keeping monetary policy extraordinarily loose. Resurgence, just let me remind you, no doubt hear about more in the programme as well, China, Hong Kong, Australia, Spain, Belgium now, along with other localised breaks across Europe, and that's heading in, and we're only in August, so things are getting very, very concerning. So I think, given the late slide as far as the US stocks were concerned, we'll probably get a similarly weak start in Europe, but it's the start of an earnings bonanza. Barclays here, first of all, but I suspect much more importantly, Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, and Facebook later this week. So the big one today is the Federal Markets Open Market Committee. Against this backdrop, the Fed meeting, they will be very, very, they will be absolutely dovish. But remember that the virus outlook is very, very different from the last time that we met. Then lockdown measures were actually being eased. Now, of course, they aren't. And today it looks a lot different. So I'm expecting them to, obviously, no change in interest rates, but I think they'll be much more accommodating about their policy and much more relaxed about inflation, for example, and their long-term goals. I suspect they will have to concentrate, and why not, on employment. And that's what they ought to be doing. So, talking about Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, and Facebook, they're being forced to testify before the US Congress today. People think they're too big. They are big, huge, huge. They are actually bigger than some small, between them, their capitalization is bigger than some small economies, and certainly much bigger than, for example, the South Korean Stock Exchange. Apple will face all sorts of questions, particularly about how it, for example, if you go into an Apple shop and you see different products there from third-party suppliers, they take 30% in fees for those, and there'll be all sorts of things about competition. Their response will be, do you know what? People actually buy Google, they buy Apple, they like Facebook. So what's not to like about that? I think there'll be, and also they can play the national card as well to say these are American success stories, which they actually are. Dominant, yes, they are too. So that's the issue. I'd like to just, before I go, point you towards something which I think is a lot more important than the big headlines that we tend to cover every day. A friend of mine has just finished doing a survey of small businesses in the United States. And small businesses, they are in your country, they are in the UK, and they are in the United States, the absolute backbone of the economy. When the lockdown started, 150,000 US small businesses closed on a temporary basis and 25,000 permanently. Now the balance is 75,000. In other words, much more temporary has become the permanent way of looking at things. In other words, most of the business in the United States in that small way is now permanent, and the rich are getting richer and the poor, unfortunately, are getting poorer. That's a sad state of affairs, and really countries around the world need to gather together and sort out some employment. And very pleased to see that your candidate for the WTO is getting that kind of high-level endorsement. As the good doctor was saying, I'm not quite sure whether endorsement is a great idea before selections are actually made, but she is, I would say, an absolute shoo-in for the job. I've met her a couple of times. I interviewed her on that trip that the good doctor was talking about when Gordon Brown came, talking about schools in Africa. She's a very impressive lady, and I hope she gets the job because I think she'll do the World Trade Organization an enormous amount of good.
Very well, very well. I just wanted to make a comment quickly about Apple being questioned as some other top tech companies. It's sad, but I'm going to say this. You can't stop what the Spanish call a mercado libre, which is a big business. I mean, it pretty much reminds me of the story in the early 20s when a certain journalist, I think it was Ida Tabor, started this push against Rockefeller and Standard Oil. And finally, antitrust laws applied and they broke Standard Oil. And I remember the words Rockefeller said to his bishop. He said, go buy a Standard Oil share now because it's going to be the biggest company in the world. And tell you what, it did. So you can't break them apart.
Yeah, I think the problem is that also remember that the politicians talking to them are probably not business people, and they probably don't understand the business. Yeah. These are not companies like railway companies or traditional corporate structures. They are evolving all the time. They're gobbling up little competitors all the time, and they take a lot of understanding. I don't expect a great deal of change in the industry to come from this congressional hearing. I suspect it probably has to take place, but what the result of it will be, I don't think it'll be a great deal. I think you're absolutely right. I think the momentum of these huge businesses will carry them across this.
Well, yesterday, Michael, you talked about gold. Gold appreciating up to about $2,000 per ounce.
Yeah.
But yesterday, again, at the London trading session, gold went down by about $70. Are we going to expect a lot of uncertainty with regard to how gold performs as a commodity?
So the word I would use about the markets is febrile. And I think that's what you're seeing as far as gold's concerned. As we said, and as you know, gold is what's called a safe haven asset, isn't it? That people are worried about something, then they tend to go into it. And I think more and more people are getting worried about what's going on, and that gives us its strength. I think 2,000 an ounce was a big ask, and I did say that yesterday. I felt it would fall back, and that's what happened. It may well advance today. It really depends on these little spikes of news and sentiment coming out. And remember, one other really important thing is, and again, this is a very subjective thing. I do get the impression that nobody of the kind of age of people actually trading commonly in the market, the youngsters, have ever seen anything like this. Not that our generation has either. But I think there's a lot of worry and there's a lot of herd instinct going around at the moment. And also remember that August traditionally, as we go into it, is a low volume month. So every movement has a massive exaggeration. I don't think that answers your question particularly well about gold, but I'm saying it's febrile and anything could happen. However, I would say that the commodity markets are worth looking at the moment, particularly grain and non-ferrous metals, but I'll leave that to the experts.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael Wilson.
Well, it's now time for update on the COVID-19 pandemic, and Aaron Akerjala is standing by to do justice to that. Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning, Adesuwa. Good morning to
Aaron.
you, Doctor. Good morning to you, Rufai. And
Morning, Aaron.
we'll start it off with
No poem?
I can't hear you.
No poem?
None at all. You know where I stand.
I like your loyalty.
Okay, I'm as firm as the Rock of Gibraltar. Moving on from there, let's actually talk about the video that has been trending from Monday night into yesterday about hydroxychloroquine being touted, about that speech that was made at the Capitol day before yesterday, that has gone viral, and it has received backlash and criticism. Of course, the Nigerian trained doctor who is in the US, of course, Dr. Stella, and has spoken about how she had treated people who were suffering for COVID-19 with hydroxychloroquine, zinc, and a combination of a drug, azithromycin, a combination of drugs ultimately to actually help some of those patients. But now the question is that she's received intense backlash. As a matter of fact, like it was reported, social media pages have actually, also the social media, Twitter, Facebook, have actually brought down the video. YouTube has also gone on to pull down the video. They said it's misinformation. But let's now look at the facts. Of course, President Donald Trump spoke yesterday, and he actually said he loved the woman as usual because he supports his notion that hydroxychloroquine actually does help treat COVID-19. And now let's look at the facts. And this woman spoke about several things that had been done, several researches. And now, if we were to push up my first float there, you get to understand that this is from the Hereford health system. And that particular man there, Dr. Marcus Davos, has been with the system for over 20 years. As a matter of fact, Hereford health system started in 1915, being founded by the famed and the legend himself, talking about Henry Ford. So this is not, they are one of the oldest in the US and arguably the oldest in the world in terms of health system, testing, and the rest of them. They have a group of hospitals, and they said on the 10th of March, they started their own testing, and it spanned from the 10th of March to the 2nd of May. And this was the result of what came out. They found out that from 2,500 patients that were tested and were actually observed, that they found that treatment of hydroxychloroquine actually cut the death rate significantly. They say by half. And this is what they're saying here, almost supporting the study of that. And in that video, the doctor made mention of, if we move on to the next one, made mention of a study being done by the NIH back in 2005. I went on to dig it up, and that's it here. When you look at it, the conclusion says that chloroquine is effective in preventing the spread of SARS-CoV. Remember, SARS-CoV and SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV is responsible for SARS and MERS, and SARS-CoV-2 is responsible for COVID-19 as we have it right now. And they said that chloroquine is effective in preventing the spread of SARS-CoV in cell cultures. Favorable inhibition of virus spread was observed when the cells were either treated with chloroquine prior to or after SARS-CoV infections. And it goes on to say that that was published there. You can see the names on top there. Those are all respected virologists in the industry who came up with this particular report in the NIH back in 2005, August 22nd, 2005. So maybe she might not be crazy. She might have brought her point very strongly, but certainly based on science as it stands right now, maybe she might not be crazy. Moving on forward again, now you find out that this was actually done. Now you can actually see the case fatality rate, talking about death rates in patients. You can find out several countries were taken. Those in green use hydroxychloroquine and some combination of drugs to actually treat patients. And you can see countries like India, Peru, Turkey, Chile, Pakistan, even in Nigeria, South Africa, Argentina, and those that actually had mixed reception towards hydroxychloroquine in the yellow, and the red were those that were not interested. UK, Spain, Italy, France, Mexico, Canada, Belgium, Sweden, the Netherlands, and on and on. It just shows one thing and one thing alone, that it is still out there. The fact that it's still a novel virus, nobody can for certain say that hydroxychloroquine works or does not work. Remember, it is still out there, because if somebody else comes out to say that based on his own science and based on his own research, it does work, and the WHO and several other health experts come out and say that based on research, they find out that it maybe can result to complication or it doesn't actually work, is still not for certain. Nothing is cast in stone right now, because the next slide also proves something. Because in Italy, for example, you can actually find it there. Look at the graphs actually moving on. Prescription of hydroxychloroquine from the 17th of March. You can actually see there, and how the rates of death started dropping. And this all proves one thing, that it might be correct, it might not be correct. But to actually dismiss this completely, and because right now what they are doing is smear campaign, looking at the woman's past and saying that she's a cuckoo and she's been this, she said that, she's a conspiracy theorist and nobody should believe her. It's still out there. It's still out there.
Aaron,
yes.
Aaron, there are many sides to this.
Yeah.
Yes. Let's not forget that at some point we even started a chloroquine trial in this country that we have not used for some time.
Yes, we did.
And let's not also forget that some people have claimed it worked for them, like hydroxychloroquine and the likes and all of that. But there's also been another body of study that talked about the fact that this will cause heart disease, this will make people die, this will shut people down as regards things like that, because it was another very comprehensive body of study. Let's not forget that all of this study came out of France, where the doctor said, okay, I'd used it and it's worked for people. But let me tell you things I have against this new resurgence. You can call me, anything you want to call me. It's election season. All of a sudden, Trump has tried to show leadership on hydroxychloroquine. It didn't work. He's tried to be state-manly. It didn't work. And all of a sudden, this came out. Aaron, you played a video. You know the B logo on that video? It's called Breitbart.
I know.
Breitbart Media is the heart of
Steve
conspiracy.
Bannon.
Steve Bannon. And I'm
we
excited.
know all that. But
I'm excited you know that.
Yes.
And since we've had a consensus test, and this woman too has come out to say all sorts of things. At first, I heard she said she was a radiologist. She said she was a physician.
Rufai, like I said to you, whatever I did today.
I checked her tweets. I saw when she said I'd like to meet the president. Trump took that to town yesterday. He started campaigning bitterly with that. I mean,
no, Rufai, I said to you,
I want healing for people. I've got nothing against hydroxychloroquine. Yeah. We've spent money on vaccines. But why is this coming now after we've rested that case? And why I don't believe that woman, I tell you, Aaron, the Breitbart I saw, the likes of the Steve Bannon
Rufai,
and some other people push, I can't understand
like
it.
I said, I didn't take it on face value, like I told you. I went and actually, because if she had said it and I didn't dig up this particular research paper that I actually brought to you this morning, probably you might actually argue. There are names written on those research papers of people that have been in the industry
and have spoken. I can give you 50 research papers too that shows the damning effect of hydroxychloroquine. So it's circumcised.
Well,
yes,
exactly. In this sense, what we're dealing with has to do with the politicization of COVID-19, and also politics catching up with the pharmacy. Because you recall that there have been references also to Big Pharma.
Yeah.
But what are we dealing with? Are we dealing with medical research, or we're dealing with an individual experience or opinion? Because as you pointed out, WHO, when hydroxychloroquine became an issue, had to withdraw it for 2 weeks from the Global Solidarity Trial.
Yes.
And then later, it was reinstated.
Yes.
But WHO continues to insist that there has been no cure yet for COVID-19. And, you know, for that reason, they were telling people more or less to exercise caution. So it's not impossible that the research is ongoing. But what can guide humanity will be science and not personal opinion.
True.
Now, in this particular doctor's case, Dr. Emmanuel, people have raised quite a number of questions. You recall that event was organized by the Tea Party Patriots, which is a right-wing body. And, you know, some people say, well, maybe she was being used to make some of those statements. And I've seen commentaries by medical doctors who are saying, look, she's a pediatrician and not necessarily involved in medical research. And there are persons who have also said, look, this is the founder of the Firepower Church. And you know how notorious, you know, these, you know, pastors have been. And she spends most of her time talking about demonic spirits and linking science with religion. So a number of people are quite suspicious. Finally, I'd like to draw attention to the statement that was issued by the Guild of Medical Directors in Nigeria, in which they pointed out clearly that, look, Nigerians should be careful. They should not, on the basis of this, begin to self-medicate. Because, as we've been told, hydroxychloroquine has side effects.
Yes, it does.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Aaron.